welcome back to This Week on Sunday's Coming. I'm excited to be here with Caleb as always.
I'm still here.
And continue our conversation with Brian Taylor.
Still here as well.
Thanks for sticking around.
Absolutely.
I know our conversations are just a joy, filled with all sorts of tangents and rabbit trails.
It's pretty amazing.
You never know what's going to happen next. It's
but
amazing.
The thing is, I can track because we're the same. Like I am a creative.
It's great.
I love spreadsheets and all the stuff, but in my core, I am a creative. Give me a good rabbit trail.
Yeah.
Let's go.
And you grew up in the 90s.
I did grow up in the 90s.
If you didn't listen to last week's episode,
Go back to last week.
yeah, it's sort of a sequential thing, so it's helpful context. So if you didn't listen to that first. This is our second episode, second part of our conversation with Brian, and we're kind of going to pick up the story where we left off, kind of continuing in your journey in ministry and sort of what you're doing now, the kinds of things you're seeing in church and ministry. So you spent a lot of time on church staff. Now you've transitioned into engaging with church and ministry in a different way. So just give us a little picture of what are you doing now? How does that look? What are sort of the ways that you're investing into leaders and churches?
So I ended my kind of full-time, I would say I'm still in full-time ministry, even though I'm not full-time on a staff at a church. And full-time ministry for me is about my mission. It's about how we approach everything that we do. And I see God, again, show up in places that aren't church conference rooms, coffee shops and corporate offices and conversations on Zoom. So you don't have to be paid by a church to be in full-time ministry. I think it would be great to reclaim that as I'm saying, I'm saying this like right now.
Yeah.
It's like, you can absolutely be a CEO or a project manager at a company and be in full-time ministry. Yeah. Okay. So I ended my church staff time, though, kind of on the senior leadership team level of large organizations like that we talked about, several thousand, 10, 20, 30, 40,000, hundreds of staff and team. When I left the church staff, though, I immediately was working with Slingshot Group, which is what I still do now. I'm VP of Worship and Creative Arts, which that role is funny for me because it's the only thing I can think of where I get to use every ounce of my history as a worship and creative pastor in my day job, not working for a church, And so sitting across from senior pastors and executive pastors now, and sometimes creative arts pastors and leaders, where they're talking through how to build their team, organizational structure and strategy, and then also having the opportunity to work with church teams. Walking into a scenario where a worship pastor, a production director, communications director is describing a scenario, and I'm like, I know exactly what that feels like. Like, man, I've gotten that email too. We've had that project scrapped at the last minute too, the big opener for Easter or whatever. And so there's a sense, I have some empathy for them, and it's not hard because I've lived that.
Yeah.
And then I also get to, we talked about, I do get to do some work with marketplace leaders, which is a newer frontier for me after so many years serving the church. It's been really wild to watch the difference between coaching maybe senior leaders in a church environment versus senior leaders in the marketplace. Which maybe is a good topic to put a pin in and come back to. But so that's what I love doing now. And it's all the people. I get all the joy and all of the, I get to sit with people in some pretty difficult things, staff transitions, things that have blown up, unfortunately, like, scandal type stuff even, where they've had a leader and it's like this sense of betrayal they're trying to process. So you still get to pastor people through it, you get to coach them through it, but then also we get to stick with them long enough to see what life is like on the other side and help them keep an external perspective. And so I love doing that work, in our own ministry and with our own organization, and then also with Slingshot.
Yeah. With that sort of breadth of experiences, you're talking to a lot of different leaders in a lot of different contexts, in a lot of different locations of the country. I'm just curious, what trends do you see that sort of cut across all those different differences, and sort of what's the state of things as you just sort of, take a pulse on the kinds of conversations you have day to day?
Yeah. I mean, I took a breath as you asked that question because, that's the thing I see the least. People are just not taking a breath. They're not responding to things from kind of a centered, like gospel-centered, but even just emotionally healthy, mentally healthy place. High degree of reactivity, which means it's like little tornadoes are being constantly spun up inside of a lot of organizations. People don't know how to process the overwhelming amount of what would appear on the surface to be chaos. Like just in our country, in the US, there's just, you turn on the news and it's like something is happening all the time somewhere. I mean, planes and weather and fires and political stuff and stock market. I mean, it's just this constant onslaught of these external stimuli, which are actually designed by nature. It's designed to keep you coming back. So there's almost like an addictive nature to it, but it is also designed to. It's like planned chaos. It's planned. Like they want you to feel unsteady, because that's what will keep you refreshing. So there's not.
It's working exactly as designed.
It is working exactly as designed. I mean, that's why for me, I go through times where I just cut out. I'm not ignorant of what's happening. I just cut out the news. I have a couple of things that I subscribe to that give me like a daily snapshot of like, here's what's happening in the markets and here's what's happening in the news. My news one is filtered. It's like news headline. Here's what God says about it. Don't forget the scripture. News headline. Here's what God says about it, And so I see that happening. So that flurry of activity is translating to organizations that are outpacing their health capacity or outpacing their resources, and they don't always see it until it's like if you had, we had to replace our dishwasher not too long ago, and when, it just wasn't working quite right. I didn't see any water, but there was that moment when they pulled the dishwasher out that I went, I wonder what's going to be in the cat. Like, is there going to be water back there? Am I going to all of a sudden have to, and a friend of ours was telling us about how they discovered a leak and the water had basically gone in, and the mold and situation had sprawled out of the kitchen and into their office and into bedrooms.
Oh my gosh.
But it was all under the floor. And there was no, like you didn't know. And then suddenly you're thrown into this kitchen renovation that ends up being, I'm going to replace all the floors. That's happening right now in so many organizations, especially in the church, because we are running at such a pace, responding and reacting to things at such a pace, and you're just not paying attention to that leak, that it looks like it's just paint peeling, but it's not. Behind that is this, constant steady drip of water and damage that if you don't address it, you're going to end up having to rip the whole thing out. So, I mean, I think that the flurry of activity, the overwhelming kind of push. I mean, if I zero in on the church space, I don't know a church right now that's not processing what's happening economically. It's not processing like, man, we have so many needs. Just so how do we keep doing what we're doing? We can't afford to pay people now what you have to pay them. We can't afford to lose the people, but then we got some people that maybe we do need to lose. We don't even know how to deal with that, so it just seems, if you're just paying attention to the surface, it just seems like there's too much going on. Now, I know, and I take confidence in the fact that Jesus is the one that builds the church, like going to the church specifically. And actually, Jesus is on the throne. And so whatever political figures do in your state, okay, great. Yeah. I'm of a different kingdom. So, okay, we'll take it as it comes. And eventually I'm getting out of here, and so it's to the believer, we shouldn't allow those things to push us to take on the chaos of the context we're in, but we would be foolish to not acknowledge something's happening, and it's disturbing and a bit disruptive.
Yeah,
as an interesting direction to take that question, but that's the trend. Yeah. If you want the cross section, that's the trend.
Yeah.
Do you think that I feel like there's so much that has to do with. I mean, I don't like saying COVID because it's way too far away now. Like it's so long ago, or it feels like that. It's literally 5 years ago, like right now, which feels like that's insane to even say.
Because it doesn't feel like 5
no,
years
it does not feel like 5 years. But like, do you think do you think that started so much of that spiraling, or is it just like it was already happening, and then that just all made it worse, and everything else happening in the world?
So, I am a firm believer that pressure just exposes what's already there. It might magnify a fracture. It might, if you had a small crack you push on, it might become bigger. Yeah. But I think what that chapter forced a lot of churches and organizations to do is come to terms with what they were really facing. I mean, like let's if we zoom into church, let's take out of the marketplace for just a second, because it's a little bit different over there. But in the church world, there's a word I use a lot called evangelastics, which is how I describe when they talk. Like, let's say a pastor talks about an event and they say there were over 25 people there. That's evangelastics, because you can count 27 people. Yep. But in our minds, we want to find out, like, what's the best way to present, like, the most ideal scenario. So I lovingly refer to that as evangelastics. We do the same thing as creatives. Like, we take it and we go, okay, but like, I know it is, but like, it's still great. It's like, our team is healthy. Like, look at this team. Look how great it is. Like, look, everybody loves working here. But like, we know at the end of the day, like, that's not, when that first thing happens that you can't ignore, that's when you figure out, whoa, there's an issue here. That's so many people. I'm going to ignore the people that left their church for political reasons, because that was kind of unique to that season. We didn't like, you stayed open, we didn't like it. You closed, we didn't like it. There were people on both sides, whatever. But the number of people that left their churches because it just wasn't a priority, they weren't connected, and the church had been driving cattle instead of leading sheep, which means no one knew I was there and no one knew when I was left. They only knew because the numbers on the kiosk were different. Like, I think the COVID, like the pandemic, exposed a formation issue. It didn't create it. It just exposed it. And so those types of, I think it just causes us to have to confront things that evangelastics would rather us ignore. Totally. So I think that's what it brought to the surface in a way we could not ignore it anymore. And yet and still, so many organizations continue to ignore it. And they're running 2019 playbooks and 1999 playbooks, and not the good kind like Blockbuster. And what was the place up here?
Family Video. Or Hollywood Video.
Where we were. They keep going like, oh, we're just going to keep running that play, that play. I mean, I once worked with a team that I would say that they were proud that they had been running the ministry playbook that they had for 20 years. It's worked for us for 20 years. And I said, I don't think it has. There's a lot of things that do, like there's central theology, foundations, pillars that work. But if you've been trying, let's take it out of our world. If you've been trying to reach kids the same way for 20 years, I can tell you, my kids, I have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, that their life, my 16-year-old's life, is nothing like what my life was at 16. What he has to deal with, and the influences, and the just the ease with which they can kind of trip into things that when I was growing up, you couldn't get to stuff. I mean, it was locked down. You had to, and they're just like, oh, some random number sends you a text message, and there you go. Yeah. You have access to gambling and porn and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, you can't deal with that kid the same way you dealt with the kid that didn't even have internet access.
It's so good.
And yet, the church is unfortunately, instead of being the lead in innovation, tend to be, at least in the organizational health, I think I consistently see about 18 to 24 months behind. Yeah. And in methodology, way behind.
Let's dig into that. Like, what do you think is the resistance? Like, what is the root of the resistance, and why aren't people energized to try things like versus say another context, maybe in the marketplace or some nonprofit space or something where new things are exciting and like people are energized by that.
Yeah.
You're describing it almost as like you encounter the opposite sometimes in ministry spaces. And what do you see as sort of the impetus of that?
I'm going to say it the way that it came to my mind.
That's great. This is a safe space.
This is a safe place. I think ministry leaders have a tendency to believe our own press. And it's not press that other people are writing about us. It's we believe the press we wrote about ourselves.
You believe there were more than 25 people there?
Yeah. It actually comes naturally to that leader saying, man, we had over 30 people get baptized. Yeah. How many over 30? Because if I say 31, probably it was 28, but whatever. If I say 31, then you start to zero in on real data. Yeah. And you can fudge numbers and estimates and things. It's like, the influencers online that are like, you can make between 40 and 80,000. I'm like, wait, what is it? That's too big of a swing. This is not real. You're playing with manipulated stats and resources. The moment you apply a real number to something, it's like you can't ignore that. When I look, can you imagine if I did that with my household budget? We'll be between 1,000 and 2,000 or whatever. Like,
doesn't
what?
work like that. Yeah.
No, it needs to be $1,483.76. But that is accountability. And when you see the number, it reveals what's actually happening. And that's just a specific, a specific spot. But I think that's the problem in the church. We start to believe our own press, and then you lose track of what's actually happening because then you don't feel the need to expose yourself to other environments. I mean, the number of leaders that I talk to in a church space that have not been in another church in like 10 years just to visit, have not gone and seen what other people are doing, have not been in a mastermind or a round table with other leaders. Like, you live in a vacuum, you believe your own press, and then you wonder why it's like nothing is changing. It's the exact opposite in the marketplace. Marketplace leaders are generally like, they are the first to say, I need help, I need coaching, I need a mentoring group, I need a mastermind, I need something that allows me to see possibility. And the church doesn't do that because that would then require them to say, well, here's where we're actually like, we have baptisms and our first time visitors, you got 10,000 people coming to church and you got 47 getting baptized or taking next steps in their faith. That's a problem. Yeah. But we don't want to deal with that because we like to say, hey. Yeah.
Well, it's almost like there's an environment created where the leader doesn't feel like they have permission to not have it figured out. Like, they don't know the right strategy to use in their community, in their context, but they don't feel safe. We've somehow, whether it's internal in their own perception or the leaders around them haven't given them permission to not have it all figured out. Like, how do you help people kind of work through that?
I think you recognize, we take on whatever the generation before us, like you see this in scripture a lot, when like the children of Israel are in the wilderness, and it like in just one or two generations, you went from people that were watching God perform these incredible miracles and, parting the Red Sea. And then a generation, after that group is gone, it says a generation rose up that neither knew the Lord or what he had done. That's my word on the street paraphrase. Like,
that's a good way to say it.
But like, man, that's what these amazing moves of God that have happened through the centuries, and how God has shown up and how little we have taken that, but we've somehow picked up all the bad habits and, like the idea that, I'm just going to pick one, the idea that to be in ministry, you have to be poor. Because at some point, however long ago, we equated poverty to holiness. That's not in scripture, for the record. But yet we believed it. So we say, hey, cost of living is way up. Like, it's impossible for people to live. And the leader's like, well, this is what we've paid our staff for 20 years. I mean, when I started, like how often I hear, when I started in ministry, I was making 30 grand. Okay, but you're hiring someone into poverty. And that doesn't register because granddad, great-grandfather decided poverty was holy. Like, that's actually not how the kingdom works. So we take on what the generations before us have passed, and some of these things we don't challenge. We run the same playbook, trying to reach that 16-year-old in 2025 the same way we did in 1995. And then we wonder why things aren't thriving. Well, I think God is the innovator of innovators. He's the creator of create. Like, he is like King of Kings, right? Is like, that's like, why wouldn't we be at the front edge? Instead, we're always at the back edge. Well, it's because we're taking our lead from ourselves rather than like, what does he have to say about that? So for those leaders, recognize that, then I think most of the problems would be solved if they just exposed themselves to different environments and got to see, instead of competing with the church down the street, or critiquing the church down the street, maybe like unfollow all the discernment bloggers and stop pulling in all the negativity that tends to make us a bit tribal in a very real way, and say, okay, what could I learn from someone else? What could I learn from the other mega church down the street? Or what could I learn from the other neighborhood church down the street? Like, I noticed our attendance dropped 30%, 40% during COVID. They didn't have a problem at all. Well, that neighborhood church probably has some discipleship strategies that you might want to employ in your big church. Yeah. They can't teach you about buildings and facilities, but they can teach you how to care for people, right? They might not be able to teach us how to build the LED wall or do whatever, but man, they can work. You can learn how to lead hymns and how to lead other facets and expressions of whatever you're doing now. If you just expose yourself to other environments and other leaders, give them the opportunity, show your weakness, that awareness, I have a pattern that I work through with all of my coaching clients, and we always start with awareness, because if you don't have awareness, you don't have anything to build on. And so if you start with awareness, the rest of it literally will unfold in front of you. Right. But if you shut your eyes off and shut your ears off, then you're just going to stay right where you are. And that's called a stall. And if you're, which is not fun to talk about before you get on a plane, but like the thing about a stall is it never stays a stall. You either correct it and you get back on track, or you don't and you go down. And I think it takes a minute for you to realize, if you're not an experienced pilot, right? Maybe the experienced pilot catch it quick, but most organizational leaders don't realize they're in a stall until they've started the descent. And now they're trying this rapid, we got to fix this thing. Well, you have to address it early enough before you reach whatever that critical point is. And you can't do that if you're the only one that has eyes on it.
Yeah. That's so good. I think when you were saying that, all I was thinking about was like my first church that I was on staff at, and the hesitancy that I had of way bigger churches and way like people that I actually know now and are friends with 12, 13 years later, but I didn't go down the street to ask them how they were doing things, or even just like look at their things just to gain knowledge as a 22-year-old in a ministry full-time position for the first time in my life, and going, man, like how much greater would my gifts would have been used at that church by utilizing the knowledge of other people, I think, around us. And I think like that's more available now than what it was with social media and with other things, to be able to DM a guy like, oh, hey, how are you doing that? And people are more open to sharing how they're doing things. But it takes effort for me to, like, either way, I have to either DM that person or go to that church or have a conversation at a conference or ask that breakout teacher after I watch this breakout, hey, what did you mean by, when you said this or whatever?
It takes humility.
Like. Yes.
Yeah, you got it. It takes humility.
Yeah.
Which isn't that weird? That's the thing that we balk at the most.
Yep.
Like, whoa.
It comes up. We did a conversation earlier in the season reflecting on some of the conversations we've had over the last few seasons of the podcast, and that's exactly the theme that comes up more than anything else is humility.
Yeah.
And are you approaching your limitations, the things, your growth edges, the people around you, people that you have perspectives different than yours, with humility and openness and curiosity? Like that is, I would say, the defining factor of a leader that one is going to be able to just sustain their ministry, because it's like not being prideful and thinking you have it all together is actually really tiring. It's like really draining. It's really hard to maintain that, because not only are you striving, but as you were describing, you're having to always construct an imaginary world. And that's a lot of mental energy. And a lot of like front to put up all the time. And so being able to approach it with humility and to create, like as a leader, and I'm just thinking about like the kind of space you create as a leader, you're modeling the kind of culture that you're creating in your staff, your volunteers, your team. And shouldn't your faith community be the place where you're the most safe to say, hey, I need to get better at this, or can you give me feedback on this, or I don't have this all together, I'm going to try to grow and get, I made this mistake, would you guys help me? Like if you as a leader aren't creating that space, like then how are you going to be able to disciple and grow the people around you in that way?
And it's, I mean, think of the leaders that you've worked with or worked for that have had the courage to say, I don't know. Like we're going to work together to figure out the answer, but I don't know. Or I made a mistake. And we think that that's actually going to, like, it pierces, like it almost pierces our armor or our facade. But it's like, no, it's the exact opposite. When I've had leaders, because everybody sees it, but when they've come in and sat down and said, hey, I'm really sorry for the way that I responded to you in that meeting. I could have done a better job. Or even when I've had to be, I've had to be the one that sits down and says, I should have probably eaten before this meeting because I get a little snappy when I'm hungry. It almost always has resulted in an increase of trust and an increase of equity with the person. I've never thought, oh, what a weak leader. I'm like, wow, number one, you owned your mistake that you didn't know. And number two, you had the courage to tell me what I already saw. So I'm not going like, man, because when you see something, the leader doesn't acknowledge it, it actually makes you go, wonder what else they don't see. And I wonder what else I don't see. It erodes the trust so quickly.
I think it goes back to the conversation that we just had in the last episode of trying to prove that you're in the right seat that you're already in, not the one that you are trying to get to. It's like you're already there. You're already sitting in that seat. And I think the way you said that is great because they already see the mistake. They already saw it. And so to just own up and be like, hey, I'm sorry. That was a mistake. I screwed it up. Whatever the thing is, it brings a lot more trust and openness. I think very similarly also to the way you were describing in the last episode, like your ability when somebody in leadership was like, hey, we need to make this change. We need to do this differently. I want to change the song. I want to do whatever. And you being, okay, let's do that. Provided more trust between you and that leader to be able to, grow that trust really, really strong, over time.
Yeah. And I mean, we also have to take into consideration sometimes it's going to go wrong. Like sometimes that leader is going to do the opposite. They're going to sit down after they snap at you and come and talk to you about your attitude. Like those are the moments. Like it's great when the leader does the good thing, the right thing. But like when the leader sits down and like, I don't really like the way that you talk to me, and I'm going, Did you see? Did you see? It just came out, right? There is a version of me that is still very present. I'm from DC, so, but like what do you mean the way I talk to you? Right? And even in those moments, like it still humility. It still requires humility, because there are two experiences in every situation, at least two. Sometimes there's more. There's your experience and their experience, and somewhere in the real is like what actually happened. But both
actually, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
That's irrelevant. Actually,
what actually happened is irrelevant. And so, I think it is like that's when those are the moments where I think we have I don't think about things as tests a lot, like God is testing you, because that makes me think of like a donkey and a carrot. Yeah. But I think there are tests we can pass where it's really like, okay, this is a test of my character. Mm-hmm. Like I say I'm a humble leader. Well, let me, like someone said it. I don't know. Maybe I always say it. I'm kidding. No, but somebody said, you want to be a servant leader? Let's see how you respond when you're actually treated like a servant. Mm-hmm. That's been floating around for a while. And it's like, that's so true. Yeah. Like what happens when you're actually treated like the servant leader? It's not just on your, the placard on your wall.
I think of it almost as an invitation, not a test. Like, hey, if leading in this manner actually leads to the fullest life and the flourishing of those around you, then when you're confronted with a place where you have two ways you can react, then you're actually invited into this way. And you can choose not to. Yeah. The outcomes here are going to be more painful and not as fruitful, but you're invited to do this even though it's hard. And long-term, the way that that's going to grow you and hopefully grow your relationship with the other person is so much better. And like the test metaphor has so much like pass-fail versus, hey, you're being invited into the best way of living. Yeah. And is that something that you want to step into?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, in that same context, I think building trust with your leader is awesome. And I think like I'm hearing that and I go, people will resonate with that, but I think they resonate more with the leader that comes back to them and goes, okay, I'm trying to be humble here. And then they're the one you would think would be apologizing is coming and going, I don't like the way you talk to me. Yeah. And that's really, really hard because over time, I mean, it wears and beats down people, and they have a hard time responding in that way or saying yes to when that leader goes, "Hey, man, change the song," and
they often end up leaving that ministry experience with a lot of wounds and pain and hurt and like all this stuff. And I think this all kind of connects. If you're saying, "Hey, the pattern I see in a lot of leaders is an unwillingness to acknowledge reality, a sense that they have to present a certain." Image, whatever. Well, of course, there's going to be a lot of people around them, whether it's congregation, volunteer staff, that are hurt and wounded and 100% challenged, leaving their interactions with that person.
Yes.
Funny how things connect that way.
Yeah, it is funny how and I think the reality is it's really easy for us to look at that leader. It's a lot harder for us to look at ourselves. Every time, you can't always change what happens in a certain scenario. But I've found that the farther away you get from it when you look back on it, like you can see, I was really upset at them, but this version of me today can look back and go, I showed up pretty rough in that conversation. Like there's one moment coming to mind for me that it was a leadership transition, and I had a leader at the executive level. There was a leadership change that was brought, and I was brought into it, which was I appreciated, but I just really hated the decision that was made, and so I was brought into it, but it felt like a gut punch. And I remember how I responded. It wasn't here because that's not really where my issue is going to be. Yeah. It was here. Yeah. So the leader said something to me and I was like, okay, if that's what y'all want kind of thing, that's great. Okay. But I felt in my heart this like, ugh. And, the gracious leader that I had the next couple of days was like, hey, like, let's talk about that. And I was like, I don't want to talk about it. But it would be really easy for me to look at that experience and go, I can't believe that they did that. I can't believe that they made that of all the organizational changes. They made that one. And in that moment, I was thinking, Brian, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe that you showed up to someone trying to bring you in the loop on something and you made it all about you. Yeah. It wasn't even a role I wanted or anything like that. It was just, I just didn't like the change. And in that moment, I'm like, why would you show up that way? In that moment, I was going, how could they do that to me? Yeah. And it's so easy for us to look at the other person and completely forget there's another experience that they're having of me. And, you know, I'm not talking about situations of like abuse, and I mean, that is unfortunately not the majority. Fortunately and unfortunately, it's not the majority of things that I see with people. You know, those situations are, you know, they're horrendous and catastrophic and devastating. A lot of it that I see, that I deal with, is it's the equivalent of like, I wanted to be a worship leader. You wouldn't let me lead worship, and I'm leaving this church because you don't acknowledge my gift. You don't value me. And I'm like, no. I actually had somebody tell me once on a worship team audition, hey, so what do you feel called to? And they said, your job. And I went, wow. Who told you that? You know? Yeah, it's like, that's deep. Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure they didn't like, I'm like, well, that's not what you're auditioning for. Yeah. But, you know, I don't think this is going to be it. You're going to, I could already see where this is going to go. You know, but maybe that person felt hurt that I didn't let them on the worship team. Yeah. But I'm like, man, the arrogance of walking into an environment you're not at all connected to and be like, I'm supposed to be doing what you're doing here. Yeah. No, I don't know. But like, it's that's the friction we encounter every day. And every leader, every single leader, you know, you might, you know, through the grace of God, may you never have to walk through an abusive situation or a situation where it's like there's, you know, criminal activity, or it's just like every single one of us will have the opportunity to walk through an offensive conversation. Every single one of us will be an offender and have the possibility of receiving that offense, and we will be presented. I love that. I'm actually going to steal that. We'll have that two path, that invitation is available, and it is so important in this present age that we are aware of the spiritual forces that are influencing the desire to be offended. Like I am convinced, you know, for a long time, especially in the American church, consumerism was the thing. Consumerism in our culture, but especially in the church. I think offense is quickly overtaking consumerism as the idol of choice for our culture. Yeah. If there's anything that this culture is bowing down to right now, it's offense. Yeah. And we're not exempt from that. You know, we don't, because we're Christians and we work in a church or we serve in a church, like you better believe that influence is still going to be screaming in our ear, especially because the church has been really highlighted in that conversation, the political things and stuff. There's just a lot of division, and we can hug that and hold closely to it, or we can go to what the Bible says about it, which is not what our culture says.
I think it's really interesting that you say, like, you see that offense, like, overtaking consumerism, and as you describe that, I almost see offense as the natural next step after consumerism. Because consumerism is like, hey, I want this stuff, I don't like it, I'm gonna leave. Yeah. The next step is, I'm taking my consumerism and my sort of self-centeredness to the next level to say, hey, I want these things, and also I'm mad at you because you didn't do it for me when I wanted the way I wanted. Yeah. And you're just ratcheting up the level of intensity that you're approaching, you know, the situation. So yeah, that's really interesting. I might get this wrong, but I think it was Dallas Willard who talked, someone asked him, like, what's the hallmark of like a really mature Christ follower, disciple, something like that. And he thought for a second, and he said, they're unoffendable. And I just think that, like, to me, that's so, it sounds so simple. It doesn't have a whole lot of theological frills around it, but it's so powerful when you think about embodied community and embodied, like, living out that, like, church reality. Yes. If you're approaching those relationships and those interactions and your preferences and your desires, and you can be unoffendable, it just opens up so many more avenues for collaboration and growth and relationship. And
it's not about being a pushover.
No.
At all.
Or being a doormat.
No.
It doesn't mean you don't make choices or boundaries.
It doesn't mean you don't say, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
Like you gave the example of the worship team, like, just somebody has a certain vision of what they want to do. It doesn't fit in the context, and they're communicating to the leadership, hey, we don't really have a spot for you to serve in that way. hey, that's totally cool. I appreciate that you're trying to do something and I'm going to do this other
Yes.
thing and that's fine.
Yes.
But that doesn't require offense, anger,
you don't have
bitterness.
to villainize.
No, you can just say, that's great. I'm going to pursue the thing I feel like I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But yeah, it's big.
There are so many offended, and I'm very much speaking ministry staff people, and I was one of them in many contexts or many scenarios at least, that very similar to the last conversation we were having, the cycle of then going, well, I'm going to go somewhere that's not going to be offensive. And I can't remember if I talked about it on other episodes, but like everybody wants to be wanted. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to be needed. It's this, who doesn't feel good when somebody's like, I see your gifting and I want you to come serve that with us because we see how that could help. Mm-hmm. And that is a much shinier carrot to run towards than to try to fix the offensiveness that you feel because your senior pastor also feels like that.
Yes.
You just know him more and you have a relationship where he said something that you didn't like, and now you're going to go to the next place that isn't doing that yet.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very, very hard cycle to go or to be in because I think it's that. I don't know. I feel like it's after 24 months of being somewhere, you start to see that or those relationships are open enough now where people are more willing to say something to your face that they maybe wouldn't have when you first started.
Yeah, that's it's interesting that we recognize that with so many other things. Like I recognize I buy a new car, leave the lot, it's going to depreciate in value. Mm-hmm. First time someone dings it, open the door. We know that the more you engage with something, the more you use it, the more you see a bit of wear and tear. Mm-hmm. We're so surprised that the relationships that we engage in and day out suddenly begin to build up some wear and tear, especially if we think like being on a church staff is like the, around the campfire songs singing, And I had someone tell me once, I say, hey, why do you want to join a church staff? And they're like, I want to be closer to Jesus. And I was like, this is not the role for you.
You want to be the furthest from Jesus.
If you are not already secure in your relationship, I mean, of course, we're all growing. Yeah. But if you are getting into this because you want to be closer, you need to you better do that before you step on the front line. Yeah. But we get into these relationships and then we're surprised that they require work. Mm-hmm. And we're like, I'm offended or I got hurt. Yes, because there's a person on the other side of the table. And sometimes, you're dealing with, what are the words people like to throw around? This is not a mental health thing, but like, you're dealing with a narcissist. I hear that a ton. My pastor's a narcissist. I don't know. Like, you're not a counselor or a therapist or a psychiatrist. I don't think you can diagnose that. But, we just start to throw out labels. Mm-hmm. This is why I don't even like I have an issue with the label church hurt. Because I think even though we experience pain and hurt, I can't put what that pastor did to me on the back of the pastor down the street. Mm-hmm. That pastor doesn't even know who I am. But there is one church. It's the church. Mm-hmm. So when I say the church hurt me, like the whole church and if it's everybody, then who do I hold accountable? How do I move forward? Again, it's like the flip side of evangelastics. If I don't have to look at an actual number, I can keep the accountability just beyond my grasp. If I can say the church hurt me, well, then that's an overwhelming task. I mean, oddly enough, you do have to start with the head of the body, which is, so like Jesus hurt, I don't know. It doesn't, it's like, what do you do with that? Instead, I can look back through my journey and I have plenty of reason. I have plenty of reason to say, oh, the quote church hurt me. Yeah. If I were to ascribe to that, which I don't. Instead, I can think of that if I start to actually name the leaders, it's a very small list. If I actually start to name the leaders that since that moment we've had moments of reconciliation, that list gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, I have some open loops. Yeah. There are some relationships that remain to this day as of yet, unresolved
Yeah.
and unreconciled for a variety of reasons. That's when I've had to get into my therapist chair and counselor's chair and say, okay, I need to figure out what was it in me that got into a situation like that and was not able to process, because forgiveness is not, it doesn't require the other person.
No.
So what is it in me that's holding on to this? Like, how do I get to unoffendable? And I've had to do my emotional work, and it doesn't matter if they ever say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe for some people, they need to hear me say that. And like that, the other person, irrelevant at a certain point. It becomes about, how do I make sure that my heart is not holding on to things that it's not designed. But if we use these broad generalizations, it actually keeps us from being able to move forward. It keeps us from being able to heal. And then you've got the person that didn't get the solo saying their church hurt right next to the person that suffered like serious abuse saying their church hurt. And I'm like, I can't put those two things. Yeah. I would rather you say, this particular worship leader did not give me an opportunity. Yeah. Great. You decide whether or not it's worth it to reconcile, or to at least have a conversation to close that loop. But if you make it about the whole church, then what do you do with that? Yeah. It's too much. You can't.
Yeah.
So I
saw this comment online of somebody talking about church hurt, and they're like, if you're putting your faith in a 501c3 organization, you like that church as a business, and you're calling that the church, it is not the same.
No.
Like Jesus is still on the throne.
Yes.
Whether or not that leader in that church, and I love what you said of like, if you actually started naming or writing down the names of the people in that organization that were truly hurting you, like the list is short. The list is short. And then as you reconcile, whether it's on your own or actually with that person, it gets even shorter.
Yeah.
It cannot be generalized as the Big C church. And it is very loosely thrown around everywhere today.
And just for the record, we're not saying, like, the hurt is real.
100%.
The pain is real.
Yes.
And even in the most devastating situations, there is still a part that each of us have to carry to make sure before the Lord we are doing the best that we have. I remember seasons of when we've walked through some pretty significant things, and what the Lord had us do. I mean, we prayed by name for the people. Some of those relationships are still unresolved. And we prayed by name every single day. Yeah. And we prayed and blessed them, prayed and blessed them, prayed them until the enemy couldn't keep that spur. And every once in a while, I get to hear a lot of situations like this. Every once in a while, it's like somebody calls me and says something. I'm like, ooh, that feels really familiar. Yeah. It's another opportunity for me to take it. Lord, I bless them. And I have to assume that what they were doing, they didn't intend this outcome. Yeah. Probably just like our parents, just like their parents, they were doing the best with what they had. Like a lot of times this comes up in transition. And I tell leaders, you can't expect a church that only deals with transition once every 18 months, 2-3 years. You can't expect them to have this thing nailed. Of course, even the best laid plans are going to get awkward and tense. You just have to say, man, they did the best with what they could. I did the best I could with what I had, and it just didn't go well. Yeah. We call it what it is, and then you ask the Lord to help you move on, and you put in the work. Work with the Spirit, and work with a counselor, work with a coach, work with someone that can equip you with tools to help you not make the same mistake with someone else that someone made with you. I have to be a better, I honor my parents. I have to be a better parent than I was parented. And that's not whether they did a good job or bad job. Like I said, my 16-year-old is dealing with different things than they had to deal with. I have to grow as a parent. Like we have to grow as leaders. We have to be willing to do the work, and it can't always be about what everyone else did or what the person on the other side of the table did. Even if it was legitimately a hurtful time, at some point, at some point you've got to make the choice to do the work and move through it, not avoid it, not ignore it, not just move past it, move through it so you can get to the other side healed and whole. Or you bring all of that, like we talked about in the last episode, you will bring all of that, everything you're avoiding and running from, you're going to bring it to whatever's next, or you're going to bring it to those who are closest to you.
Yeah.
It could be your friend, it could be your spouse, it could be your kids, or you're going to bring it to yourself. And that's that external, the rage, the unforgiveness is going to turn inward, and you will start to feel those things about yourself because we're not designed to live with that amount of open loop, unresolved. You have to deal with it, and you have to deal with it now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't deal with it yesterday, what do they say? The best time to plant trees 20 years ago. Next best time is like today.
Yep.
Because you have what you have.
Yeah.
I think even as you were saying, like thinking about a leader or the expectation that the people who hurt you legitimately or not, and that's on you. It's pain to you regardless.
Yeah, the experience.
The experience is yours.
The experience is valid.
Yes.
Like whether it was real, like what somebody else might think is real or not. Like when I was a kid, I went on a roller coaster. I thought I was going to die. Was I going to die? No. But that experience actually marked me emotionally and created some things that I had to deal with because my experience was that old wooden roller coaster was going to kill me. Everybody else was having a great time.
Yeah.
It was absolutely traumatizing to me. That experience you had is real, and you have to work through it and acknowledge like what happened to you happened to
And
you.
that's a life, like you're describing an experience as a kid, like family of origin dynamics, experiences that you have that are completely out of anyone's control throughout your life. There's all kinds of things that are going to happen to you in your life that involve other people, involve family, involve no one other than yourself.
Yes.
And it's like you said, there comes a point where you have to chart a path forward for your own health and well-being.
Yes. Yeah.
That requires you kind of work through that, release things, get the help that you need. Like it goes back to that, like getting perspectives, getting other input and wisdom, you know? And I mean, it's not just church, it's every aspect
It's
of life.
every aspect.
Yeah.
And Jesus has very strong words for bad shepherds. And to be able to release those things and go, hey man, like this is not on me to control whether X person is going to call me one day and apologize for the things that they did. Because they probably won't.
Probably not.
And those things, legitimate and valid or not, but when they are valid and they're serious, like actual spiritual abuse or anything else to that, like, man, God has some very, very strong words for bad shepherds who are leading their flock. And that is not on you to control.
Yeah.
And
He has similarly strong words for people that hold on to offense, and for people that would rather hold on to what they know and believe rather than, you're exposed to the truth, but you ignore it.
Yeah.
You hear the word, but you don't do it. Like scripture is super clear. And the good news, I mean, this is actually good news. You can't do anything about the leader. You can do everything about yourself.
Yes.
You can't do anything about whether or not you get the apology. You can 100% decide whether or not you're going to forgive.
Yeah.
And it is just a choice to make. It's not you choose it, and then you work towards what you've chosen. You don't allow the enemy to change your mind.
Yeah. Gosh.
Well, to kind of continue your story a little bit and just keep going through that journey, you've been, as you shared, like in a lot of different church contexts, a lot of large, complex church environments. You're serving in some of these other ways now, and you're even in a maybe a new to you type church context.
Yes.
It's very, very different than,
and
I think, to tie this back to what we were just talking about, I think sometimes if you've spent a lot of time in certain formats and methodologies of church, it's very healing and sort of expansive to experience church in a very different context than what you've had before in your life. So maybe talk about that. What has that meant for you? And just sort of, I think that experience will be enlightening to people that are sort of reflecting on their own journey.
So, I mean, like I said, I do consider ourselves, we're in full-time ministry, right? We just don't serve on a church staff. So the church that we are members of now is the first church that we've ever really gone to and joined that, like we joined the church. I didn't start on staff and then become a part of the church. It's a church in our community, and it's a much smaller than what we're used to. And I get to serve as a volunteer. And we lead worship. Last week I run front of house. I've done pro presenter. And it's just like I did stage team for a while, set up and tear down, stuff like that. And it's been remarkable to have what I consider to be the everyday church member experience, where we just go to church. It's, just had our 3-year anniversary, but there's no kids ministry on Sundays. So it's like families in the room, under 100 people, and it's me and my wife and our kiddos, and it's community. We have a small group, and I think it has in a lot of ways been healing for us to reset our expectations, because everything else that we've done, like I said, very large, high production, high degree of excellence. And even when we weren't on, every time we were in those rooms, we were on. Because I'm seeing the lights, or I'm seeing we missed that cue, that mic wasn't on. Oh, they botched that instrumental. Lyrics are, they're, come on, we're trying to sing, Sometimes in church, we don't even have lyrics. We're working on it. But
that was the week you did Pro Presenter, right?
But the reality is, I remember the first day we walked. So two of our dearest friends, probably our closest friends that we've had, and they've been our friends for years, almost the whole time we've been in Texas. And so they've walked with us through several of these seasons and iterations, and they invited us to go to church. And I remember the first time I walked in, and it was, we were pretty fresh off the end of a season of being on staff at a church that honestly didn't go very well at the end. And I remember walking in and the Lord going, you have a choice. Because I walked in and I was like, where are the greeters? Where are the things? Where's this? Where's that? Where's this? Where's the team? Where's the, why is the lights? Why are they?
Yeah.
And he was like, you've got a choice. You can cling to what you spent the last 20 some years clinging to, or you can just meet with me here. And I did that. I remember doing that and having that, it was a gentle argument with the Lord in the moment. And I remember when I made the decision, I said, okay, I'm going to forget about all this other stuff, and I'm just going to meet with you here. And it was incredible. Tears and all the things, because it was like just the relief, the sense of relief. And I would imagine that the people that are listening, the leaders listening, would go, well, I can't do that. I can't do that because I'm this, I'm that, I'm the production guy, I'm the creative director. The craziest thing for me, what I realized after, is that was always available to me. I made the choice to keep my phone on, not to put my phone on Do Not Disturb when I sat in service. So I'd get those text messages and I'd be responding in the middle of worship. Or I'd be responding in the middle, or I was the one that was like
doing the texting.
Most of the time. And the realization of it's available. It's available for you right where you are. For a number of years, we had to create our own environments like that. We've been called to some places that are different than our wiring, even spiritually. And so in those moments, I remember those same friends, we would meet at their house on Friday nights just to pray and to worship. And that was us digging the well so we could go into the environments that we knew we were there, and it was change management. It was difficult. It was going to be a time before we saw what we were looking for. Wherever you are, it's available for you. You just have to be the one that says, actually, I care more about meeting with God here than I do about us getting this perfect. Because I guarantee you there's other people watching. There's someone else is thinking about that. Your lighting director probably saw the light Q2. They don't need your non-encouraging text at 15 minutes into the service. They really don't. But that realization, again, the personal responsibility that and even since there's some, our church meets on Saturday nights because another church they have like 5 or 6 churches that meet at their church.
That's awesome.
It's the most amazing thing.
That's so cool.
And they're just like, yeah, we got space. They built another venue. And so now they have like 2 churches meet. It's the most amazing
That's
thing.
awesome.
But there's some weeks I walk in and I'm like, wow, this is what's happening, and I'm getting in trying to troubleshoot and help, and that's great. But every single week it's still available. And God is that same invitation.
Yeah.
I can step into this differently than I've wired myself to, right? I can build a different neuro pathway or whatever to not, it's like you don't have to pick up your phone to check to see if you have that same thing. You don't have to check if you have notifications.
Yeah.
Just look at the notifications the next time you're supposed to. You can walk into that worship center on the days you're not off, and if you don't have, again, this is another episode. If you don't have time off, if you don't have days off, you might have to dig your own wells like we did. You might have to get some people together to watch another church's service on YouTube in your living room, or get your worship leader friends together and sit around your kitchen table and talk about what God is doing in your life. It doesn't have, the church doesn't have to be your end all be all. It's not designed to do that.
Well, it's a more expansive vision of the church.
Yes.
It's not that the church doesn't have to be, it's like, no, the church isn't only happening at this one time in this one place.
It can happen in your living room. Exactly. It can happen in the sanctuary. It can happen in the Starbucks. But we have to be the ones that pursue that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It, all I'm thinking about is like, the church that we know today, the mega churches that I've been on staff at, like the idea of that has not existed for very long. The 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 seat auditoriums didn't exist. I don't know how many years ago it was, but when you think about that over humanity and early Christians and Old Testament and New Testament, and that is not the way that church church happened, and it happened in people's homes, and it happened on the streets, and it happened at beaches that
all over the world.
Correct.
Today.
Yes. Correct. And that's the thing. It's still happening like that today. And one other thing that I'll say is, like, when you're saying, for those of you listening to me say this and going, I can't do that. I'm a creative person. I'm a production. Like, I'm thinking that in my own head, and I go, I have a hard time doing that. And all I was thinking about was me sitting at Christmas Eve service with my family and going, I'm having a really hard time focusing on what this should mean to me, and not, oh, hey, I want to text my buddies over there in the booth because I'm seeing something, or, oh, that was really awesome. Great job, guys. Like, those are the things I'm thinking about. And I go, I still have the opportunity to do that, even in that environment that still has all of those amazing things and amazing tools. And I don't have to necessarily go to a 50-person church to experience that. But man, like, it's on me. It's not on the church to do that for me.
Yeah.
It's on me to walk in with that, attitude of going, hey, God, I'm going to meet you where you want to meet me right now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do all the things that I possibly can to get rid of the distractions so that I can focus on that and not think about, the lighting cue that's messed up.
I just would remind people there was likely a time where they walked into church and thought none of these things.
100%.
And yet we think it's so ingrained in us.
Totally.
We trained ourselves to do it. You just have to train yourself to not.
It's so good.
Like this is like any other discipline point. There was a point maybe you didn't go to the gym, and now you go to the gym. When you first started, it was probably a lot harder than it is now. You trained yourself to get up and go. You have to do the same thing. You have to train yourself to, this is how I'm going to show up to those offensive conversations, to these, church services, to these moments with your family where you're being drawn to the flurry of notifications that you're seeing, but you're sitting playing cards with your kids. Like, you have to no one is going to do this for you. The good news is that we don't have to do it alone, right? The partnership of the Holy Spirit is that God's like, yeah, okay, if you set your mind and say, God, I had to ask in that moment. He gave me the invitation, but I was like, you're going to have to help me because this is difficult. Yeah. I don't like feedback, and I hear feedback, and I can't deal with the it's wrong. It's wrong. And he's like, well, if I don't care, why should you? Well, And it's like, well, you're going to have to help me. And I even say that. I still walk into some of those environments, like, and maybe like when you feel yourself like drunk, God, you're going to please help. God, like those little whisper prayers.
Yes.
God, I need your help. I'm trying. I have seen him do it for me and so many other people that I know. You just have to train yourself in a different. It's a different kind of godliness.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's like you
It's a different kind.
You know what I'm saying? Like we think of godliness
take every thought
of like
captive and make it obedient. Like
we think of godliness, so like I'm gonna read my Bible and godliness is also not being distracted when you're with your kids. It's also
reading your Bible is just the gym to go out and actually do the thing.
100%.
Like that actually on its own is nothing.
It's
absolutely
right.
nothing.
If you don't apply it.
So I mean, I think you're right on.
Yeah.
Dang.
Well, so much in there.
That was
Brian.
great.
Thank you for sharing, and
thank y'all for having me.
We've gone in so many different directions, and I think, you know, the cool thing about hearing people's stories is that, you know, you cover so much ground, and at the same time, like so relatable to people that have spent a career in ministry, that have experienced their own versions of so many of these different things and had to battle these same different situations. And so I know a lot of it will be really encouraging and challenging to people listening. So
I hope so.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank y'all very much for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, man. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, chat with you, what would be the best way to do that?
So I hang out most on Instagram and LinkedIn. Instagram is @BrianTaylor. I know I'm millennial because I said right? But whatever.
Did they not say that?
I don't know. I've seen people.
Did they not?
I don't know.
I was like, I'm
I
a
don't know.
millennial and I have no
I know
idea.
you're a millennial because you have your name with no numbers or anything in it. You got it.
I got it. OG.
When it was just like your name.
Yeah, I do. It's amazing. Yeah, I'm Brian Taylor 7344.
Right,
you know,
right.
And so, but also my website briantaylor.co. Everything's there.
Awesome.
You can send me a DM or send me an email, and the community and coaching and stuff that we do, information's about that.
Fantastic, man. Dude, well, thank you again for coming up and having this conversation with us. And I'm looking forward to seeing the responses and the feedback of that, because it's very, very good. And I'm just thinking about all of my last 10 years of ministry. It's great. So thank you again. And for those of you listening, we will see you all next week. Goodbye.